Hi, my name's Paul. I'm a personal trainer and nutritionist. And look, the Western world, we've got a health crisis. And I want to call into question the nutritional guidelines of the Western world, the UK and the US specifically. Something isn't right. We're getting more CVD, more type 2 diabetes. We're getting more overweight. We're getting more autoimmune diseases, cancers. Something doesn't add up. Watch this following video. Ask these questions yourself. This is the best unbiased source of information that I can come up with. Do your own research. I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Question is, should we trust the food guidelines? And I'll read this briefly. Trustworthiness of food guidelines is a complex issue, and here are some of the points to consider. You've got the conflicts of interest. So industry funding is one of the things that many people now point to as being clouding the real information that we're getting as regards to how we should eat. Many food guidelines receive funding from food and beverage companies, which can lead to conflicts of interest. You've also got lobbyists. Industries may lobby to influence guidelines, potentially prioritising their interests over public health. You've also got a lack of transparency. Funding sources might not be clearly disclosed, making it difficult to assess potential biases. The quality of the data, the quality and selection of data used to inform guidelines can be questionable. The methods of how they come up with this information, you have to take that into consideration. Nutrition is a complex field, and simplifying recommendations can lead to oversimplification or misinformation. You have the one-size-fits-all approach. That's where guidelines might not account for individual differences in nutritional needs, health status, or lifestyle. You have examples of controversies. So you have the sugar industry influence. The sugar industry has been accused of influencing guidelines to downplay the risks of sugar consumption. Well, there's plenty of evidence that this has actually gone on. You can actually do your own research to actually find out how much money's been paid to actually blame other nutrients. There was an incident, I think 20 or 30 years ago, where the sugar industry paid equivalent to today's money of something like $50,000 to actually implicate fat as being the cause of diabetes, not sugar. And that's still sticking around now. You've got the dietary cholesterol guidelines have been criticised for being overly restrictive on dietary cholesterol despite limited evidence. So what can we do? You can consult multiple sources, which is how I'm going about this. This is what I want to get people to do for themselves. You've got to evaluate the evidence, consider your own individual needs, and by all means seek medical advice from professionals. And then we come to the end of this part, and it says some trustworthy sources for nutrition guidelines, and they include the NIH, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and the American Heart Association. Now, I'm going to be highlighting them a little bit later in the video, or I may even do another video separately about this, about where they get their funding from. And that's also something you have to question. So I asked it another question. Is there any hard evidence to base the guidelines on? And it says the evidence-based the evidence base for nutrition guidelines is often a topic of debate. While there are many studies on nutrition, the quality and relevance of the evidence can be limited by various factors, such as study design limitations. Observational studies are exactly what they are. They're just observational. They're not set in clinical conditions where people are locked away and watched over many, many years to see where they can take out all the other variables. So most studies rely on self-reporting. You've also got short-term studies, making it difficult to draw conclusions about long-term health effects. Animal studies, which you can't really take a lot from. The next big issue is about the funding and bias. Industry funding, as I said earlier, studies funded by industry may more likely produce results favourable to the funder. The likelihood is that if they were to do a study to try and prove a particular hypothesis about a food and whether it was good or actually deleterious to your health, if the study actually came back showing that something they were trying to promote wasn't actually good for you, the study would probably never get published at all. The lack of standardization. Dietary assessment methods. Different methods for assessing dietary intake can lead to inconsistent results. Food classification. Foods are often classified into broad categories which can mask important differences. One of the good examples of this is that in food surveys, a pizza can be classed as meat if it's a pizza that has meat on it. It can also be classed as a vegetable if it's got tomato sauce on it. Any study that has a pizza in the meat category cannot really inform us on whether meat is actually healthy for us, because there's obviously other things that are going to influence the results that they come up with in the studies. So we've got controversies and criticisms. Dietary cholesterol, for instance. The evidence for limiting dietary cholesterol has been questioned. Saturated fat and the relationship between saturated fat and heart disease is still debated. For the most part, saturated fat and cholesterol have now been listed as nutrients that are no longer of any real concern. But this message is still there all the time. Lower your saturated fat, keep your cholesterol down. We're taking medications for trying to lower our cholesterol, which is actually just seems absolutely nonsensical when you think that cholesterol is such an important part of every cell in the body, and it plays a role in virtually every function in the body. You've also got the low-fat versus low-carb diet. Studies have produced conflicting results on relative benefits of these diets. And there's some notable examples of flawed or misleading nutrition studies. And the 7 countries study is pretty much one of the foundational studies that the whole of the food guideline in the Western world has been built on. The 7 countries study, which is totally flawed. It says there, it says it's flawed. It is flawed. I suggest you do more research on the 7 countries study if you don't already know about it. Another study, the Women's Health Initiative. Again, it totally contradicts some of the results, but they've cherry-picked the evidence out of that study and tried to make recommendations on it. So we get to the end, and we've got reliable sources of where the AI has actually gathered its evidence. So if you want to go into that a little bit deeper, you can check all these different sources. And so the takeaway from this is, put this question into AI yourself and see what it comes up with. But you've got to question why we're being led down this path. Are we being controlled by the food companies and the pharmaceutical companies? The belief is that is the case, but how are we going to get to change things? So the next thing I'm going to do is actually look into the supposed trusted sources for the food guidelines, the American Heart Association, the NIH. I'm going to look at how they're funded. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you on my next video. Hopefully we're beginning to see the light now.